Chapter 45, Chapter 0045, The Last Hero of Humanity. So, you entered the 10th floor alone? Hephaestus's face was extremely calm in the room, but everyone could hear the anger in her words. Yami, who was a little happy because he became stronger, became embarrassed again. However, there was no way to do this. After all, adventurers could not lie in front of all the gods, and even malicious thoughts will be noticed by the gods. Even if they want to hide it, it will be useless. Hephaestus-sama, I'm fine, and I killed several orcs, at least in the upper area. Even if they can't beat me, I can escape. Did you really kill an orc? It was another surprising remark. If Hephaestus hadn't sensed that Yami was not lying, she really couldn't believe that a newcomer who had just been an adventurer for 2 or 3 days was able to go deep by himself and defeat the orcs by himself. This kind of brilliant records have never been seen in Oreo. You are still a child who is too good at causing trouble. But with your growth, it seems that it was wise to let you join the family on a whim. In the end, was it because of the goddess whim that he was able to join the Hephaestus family? This answer really made Yami feel a little frustrated. Okay, don't feel frustrated. I was just joking. Initially, I thought you were very sincere, and the family members needed fresh blood. I just didn't expect that I would find a treasure. Lie down. Let me see how much you have improved after defeating the orc. Take off your shirt. This was what Yami was looking forward to, becoming an adventurer, being bestowed with the favor of the gods, and having the possibility of becoming stronger. Therefore, the secret that Yami had many skills would be impossible to hide for a long time. Goddess Hephaestus was also a very good god, and she was very gentle to her children, so there was no need to create barriers between them. Yami hummed, walked to the bed, and lay down on the bed. He didn't seem to feel that there was anything wrong with it. The red-haired goddess was also sitting on the edge of the bed. Since she came hastily and didn't bring any tools, she could only bite her fingers with her teeth. One like a pebble falling into a calm lake, a drop of divine blood dripped onto Yami's back. The sacred blue text appeared, and every character in the status bar was floating and changing. In addition to the rapid increase in the basic ability value, new sacred text appeared in the skills and magic bars. Your growth is really... Hephaestus slowly opened her eyes wide, looking at the constantly changing stats in surprise. Yami LV.1 Strength, H158 AE 453 Vertical Bar Durability, I-85 AF 362 Vertical Bar Dexterity, H120 AE 420 Vertical Bar Agility, I-139 AE 411 Vertical Bar Magic, I-0 AG 289 Vertical Bar 1 Development Ability, Forging B1 Magic, Mole of Love D, 2A middle. Use the magic mole to charm the opposite sex. A middle. Women who come face to face with you will have strong, loving feelings toward you. Skill, Almighty Man, A middle. Sometimes, can get unexpected improvement. Breath of Flame, A middle. Enhance physical ability if / can emit extremely scorching flames. Transparent World, A middle. Conceal your grudge. 1. The ability to predict actions and dodge attacks will be greatly improved. A middle. Able to see the opponent's body structure clearly. 2. Breath of the Sun, A middle. Enhance physical ability. A middle. / can carry the terrifying solar fire. A middle. Increased damage to evil enemies. When fighting with evil enemies, the full ability is greatly increased. Mark, A middle. Increase heart rate and oxygen supply capacity. Greatly enhance combat ability. A middle. Able to help recognize people to open marks. Brave C, 1. Annihilate mental interference such as coercion, confusion et broken bar. A middle. Basic attributes are doubled during the battle. Entering the dungeon for the second time. This kind of growth is really unbelievable. It was too fast. In just 1 or less than a day, all the basic ability values AA had broken through to 3 digits, and there were so many more comprehensive skills. Hephaestus didn't know what to say, especially the extra skills. Any one of them was enough to greatly increase the strength of a certain adventurer. But when these skills were all gathered together, no one would know exactly what kind of improvement would be obtained. The only certain thing was that that person would definitely be very strong. In addition, the additional levels of skill suffixes and the newly added magic made Hephaestus feel refreshed, which had never happened before. 2. She didn't know how to explain it, so she could only attribute all the credit to the Almighty Man. Hephaestus's expression became extremely solemn. Could it be that Yami was a descendant of a certain hero who took over the duties of the last hero and was born to crusade against the Black Dragon? If this was the case, it could explain why he had so many rare skills, and his growth rate was also unbelievable. One coupled with the introduction of Mark, it could help people around him to open up the same skills. The situation became more and more serious, and the last hero of mankind became her child. Thinking of this, the corners of Hephaestus's mouth slightly outlined a pleasant arc. 1. A Broken Bar. Chapter 46, Chapter 0046, Children Make Choice But I Want It All. The shocked Hephaestus fell silent, and the room became silent again. Yami didn't bother. He probably knew what his goddess had seen, so it would be better to give her enough time to digest it. As for him, it would be better to honestly play dead. Yami, I have locked your status. Unless there is an unlocking potion, no one can see it. Regarding your ability and magic, you must never tell others, including familiar members, including Tsubaki. Do you understand? 1. Hephaestus returned to her senses and gave instructions while copying Yami's status on paper. This was not the first time she had said such words. Anyone with a discerning eye could see the potential of Yami. Among Oreo, many people could read the god's language. Just in case, it was better to lock it up. It would be very troublesome if other familiar members knew about it. I understand, Hephaestus-sama. I'm not that stupid. I won't expose my situation. After answering solemnly, feeling Hephaestus's soft palm gently patting his back, Yami got up slowly and took the paper on which his status was printed. The above content was even more exaggerated than he had imagined, and the increase in basic status was especially exaggerated. Originally, he thought it would be almost 100 points. But he didn't expect that 2 of his stats would nearly reach 502. But this was undoubtedly good news. The rapid increase in the basic stats proved the correctness of Yami's idea, and it seemed that the concentration of monsters could help increase his stats faster. Thank you for updating the status for me, Hephaestus-sama. After briefly understanding his basic situation, Yami expressed his heartfelt thanks to Hephaestus. You don't need to thank me for this kind of thing. It seems that our relationship is very distant. Yami, you must remember that you are the child I have approved of. We shouldn't be too estranged. Although I know you like Hestia, and I hope you can win her favor, but if you are too serious towards me, I will also be jealous. 5. Yami, a broken bar. There was no way to answer this. He couldn't say that he not only wanted Hestia, he also wanted her. He wanted both of them. If he dared to say such words, he was afraid that his own goddess would smash his head off on the spot, and maybe he would be kicked out of the familiar. 2. It would be better not to say that kind of thought. Huh? Hephaestus sensed something and looked at Yami with burning eyes. You seem to be thinking about something bad. No, number. I will remember what you said and correct it in the future. Yami responded urgently. Obviously, she already knew that Yami was lying, but Hephaestus did not expose it. Although she couldn't know what Yami was thinking, she could still guess the general range. The red-haired goddess didn't feel offended. It was normal to be admired by her own children. Even Hephaestus really hoped that Yami could shift the focus of his admiration from Hestia to herself. 3. It's getting late, Yami. You should go to bed. Hephaestus stood up slowly and walked to the door. Yami also got up quickly to see her off. When she arrived at the door, the red-haired goddess stopped suddenly. She turned slightly, with a touch of teasing in her eyes. In addition, regarding your magic, I don't want you to abuse your magic and do anything wrong. Do you understand what I mean? 1. Hearing this, Yami's body froze suddenly, and a look of shame and indignation appeared on his face. How could he do such a thing? Even if Yami wanted to hug girls left and right, it was not this way. There was a big difference between being romantic and being obscene. Hephaestus-sama, seeing that Yami was embarrassed, Hephaestus chuckled lightly and didn't give him time to get angry as she turned and left the room, leaving only a burst of fragrant wind in place. Yami, who had nowhere to vent, could only sigh and step forward to close the broken door. He didn't expect that even Hephaestus would begin to learn bad things and was keen to play tricks on people. In other words, maybe this was the true appearance of the forging goddess. Hephaestus-sama also has such a side to her. It seems I should be mentally prepared in advance so as not to make a fool of myself during the conversation. One Yami, lying on the bed, kept echoing the words of Hephaestus just now in his mind, and the thoughts in his mind also fluctuated slightly. In the quiet environment, his breathing gradually became steady. 1. A Broken Bar. Chapter 47, Chapter 0047, Blacksmith LV.5. Bright sunlight streamed into Yami's bedroom through the window. Feeling the faint warm light, Yami woke up from his sleep. It's been a long time since I slept so comfortably, even though he only came back in the middle of the night last night, and a lot of time had passed in communicating with Hephaestus. The increase in strength made Yami less dependent on sleep than before. In addition to granting amazing physical strength, constant breathing significantly increased recovery. Simply put, Yami only needed to rest for 4 to 6 hours to recover his exhausted physical strength and energy. Tsubaki didn't come to kick the door today, which made him feel very relieved. Sitting up from the bed, he looked out at the window. The courtyard was as empty as ever, and there were few figures. None of the members of Hephaestus's familiar seemed to have returned from the dungeon. But thinking about it, there were not many people with talent in the familiar, and he was not the only one who knew how to work hard. In addition to the blacksmith shop on West Street, the Hephaestus familiar also owned property in the Babel Tower, and most of the members gathered there. Therefore, it was normal to not see too many people here. After a simple wash, I'll find Tsubaki. I don't want the door that was repaired the second time to be damaged the third time. If this continues, I will definitely suffer from a nervous breakdown. 12. Looking at his poor door, Yami didn't know what to say. Hephaestus's familiar's captain was more maniac than he imagined. If Tsubaki kicked down his door like this again, Yami would seriously consider whether to move out. A broken bar. Yami skillfully came to Tsubaki's room and knocked lightly on the door. The door is unlocked. Come in. Tsubaki's voice came from inside the room. Yami turned the doorknob, and the scorching heat rushed over his face instantly. It was obvious that Tsubaki had already woken up and devoted herself to forging. As for why she didn't come to call him, that was not clear. Passing through the room, the wall with a gap was the passage leading to the forging room. Even if you just stood outside, you could hear iron hammering from it. She was worthy of being the most powerful blacksmith in Oreo, and no one could match her diligence. Captain, yo, good morning, Yami. The time is just right. Seeing Yami's arrival, Tsubaki stopped what she was doing and spoke with a bright smile. Yami saw her throwing the mold she had made into the coolant. Zzzz. Steam rose all over, mixed with an unpleasant metallic smell. Today's plan has changed. I originally planned to continue teaching you basic forging skills, but I have used too many resources. I have almost used up all the ores, and other advanced materials have also been used up. I have to go out to buy them. Let's go together to the market to see if any suitable materials are available. Go out? Yami, who was looking for a reason to give up learning to forge temporarily and focus on exploring the dungeon and leveling, suddenly had his eyes shine. Wasn't this a ready-made reason for not learning how to forge? Looking at Tsubaki, who was cleaning her hands and dressing, Yami suggested, Captain, there are very few precious materials on the market. Why don't we go to the middle levels to find them ourselves? We can forge while looking for materials. It can also improve my status. Kill 3 birds with 1 stone. What do you think? The dungeon? Hearing Yami's words, Sabaki paused slightly. She didn't think about other places but thought about the feasibility of this matter in her heart. As a high-level adventurer of the Hephaestus familiar, Sabaki obtained her strength by going to the dungeon by trying out weapons she crafted. Usually, she often went into the dungeon, and finding materials there was common for her. What you said is very reasonable. You are also a newcomer, so I will take you to the middle level to study for a while. By the way, I will teach you to identify the most precious materials on those monsters. But let me say it first, the monsters in the middle level are powerful, and the situation is complicated and changeable. Only the two of us will be there, and you will act as my support for the time being. You must obey my command in all actions and don't act rashly. Otherwise, I may not be able to protect you in time. Do you understand? While speaking, the dull hair on Sabaki's head swayed slightly, with a serious expression on her face. Having achieved his goal, Yami naturally responded, "Don't worry, Captain, I can protect myself and won't act recklessly, so don't worry." "Okay, let's make some simple preparations, about 1 to 2 weeks worth of food, and then we'll set off." Ultimately, Sabaki agreed to the proposal to go to the dungeon. She really wanted to go to the dungeon to look for some materials. By the way, she also wanted to cultivate Yami's combat ability. Yami hurried back to his room and put on the initial equipment. As for the rations and so on, they could buy them on the way later. If he could find the right material in the dungeon, he could also update the equipment on his body. 1 Chapter 48, Chapter 0048, Perhaps this is the hero. Bathed in the morning sun, Yami and Sabaki walked alongside the mighty team of adventurers and entered the dungeon. Ororio was called the Labyrinth City, not only because of its complex structure but also because of the existence of dungeons. Through the entrances of each passage, the adventurers of Ororio began to disperse towards the surrounding caves and stayed away from other people during the exploration process. This was an unspoken rule of all adventurers, and there were naturally experienced and lowest-level adventurers. Most newcomers still chose to explore steadily and first get acquainted with the life of adventurers. Yami and Sabaki were naturally not in these ranks. The magic stones and materials dropped by the upper-level monsters were far from meeting Sabaki's needs, and the equipment forged from them was not satisfactory, so it was necessary to continue to go deeper. 1. As he continued to move forward, the surrounding adventurers also completely disappeared. In the not-so-wide passage, the wall flickered, and goblins began to spawn from the wall, charging toward the two of them, screaming strangely. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Yami felt fewer monsters were around. "Don't be confused. I told you before that the dungeon is alive. It will automatically detect the adventurers who enter the dungeon and then create various monsters to drive them away. If the adventurer's strength is far beyond the strength of the monsters on the current floor, it will not create too many monsters to die." "I see." Yami nodded in realization. Did dungeons still have such rules? "Don't be in a daze. I will explain the basic situation of each floor to you later, and I will leave these goblins to you to deal with. Please move a little faster. Time is precious." "Leave it to me." Looking at the group of not too dense goblins, Yami slowly stepped forward and drew the longsword at his waist. The moment the longsword was unsheathed, there seemed to be a buzzing that shook the air. "Grach!" The bloodthirsty goblin roared loudly, and Yami stepped forward with the sword in hand. Kai! The head of the goblin in the front rushing towards him was easily cut off. With a single slash, facing the dozen or so goblins that surrounded him from the opposite side, Yami slashed the blade horizontally and slashed forward without hesitation. The sharp blade instantly cut the goblins in the front row. These weak monsters had been unable to cause him the slightest obstacle. Sabaki's eyes flickered, standing behind him. Even as a blacksmith, her combat prowess was still good, so she could naturally see the subtle changes in Yami. Obviously, this little guy's strength had improved again. "You are getting stronger and stronger. Quickly collect all the magic stone fragments, and then move on." "Yes, Captain." Yami nodded, stepped forward, and dug out the magic stone fragments from all the goblins. Of course, Sabaki also joined in to help collect all the dropped items. The mess was quickly cleared up. The two stopped staying and walked towards the corner of the passage ahead. The layout of the upper level would hardly change, and only from the middle level would the dungeon be like a maze, except for the occasional fog that rose, and the terrain would undergo complex changes. Yami began to sweep all the monsters along the way, during which Tsubaki did not help. When they reached the 6th floor, Yami and Tsubaki met a young adventurer in ordinary clothes on their way to the 7th floor. The boy holding a short sword was fighting with a killer ant about half a meter away. The boots under his feet provided his small body with nimble speed. The leather armor on his body was corroded by the mucus sprayed out by the killer ants. He would still feel pain and could not help but groan. However, the boy's eyes were still full of determination. The short sword in his hand caught the sharp claws of the killer ant abruptly, and then he walked forward, and the short sword slashed at the hard shell of the killer ant. Clang! There was a crisp metal impact sound. The shell of the killer ant was intact, but the short sword flew out directly. The weapon in the boy's hand obviously couldn't break through the defense of the killer ants. Shit! The vibration of the weapon made the young man freeze. In his sight, the sharp teeth of the killer ant were mercilessly attacking his chest. If this bite hits him, he will not be able to survive. Just when the young man fell into despair, there was a sudden sound of wind breaking in the distance. The killer ants in midair had no time to dodge, and their neighing stopped abruptly. The foul-smelling liquid sprayed out and fell on the floor of the maze. The body of the killer ant was smashed to pieces. The young man sluggishly sat on the ground, panting heavily, his heart full of joy and fear for his life. In his sight, he saw the back of a silver-armored swordsman, dazzling in a dim environment. Young man, coming to this place alone is very dangerous. If you are not strong enough, you should find some reliable teammates to explore together. I suggest you go back to rest today and come back tomorrow. Next time, remember to do what you can. Yami picked up the flying dagger, put it on the ground near the boy, then turned and left. The young man stared blankly at his leaving back, thinking of the heroic stories circulating in the village as a child. Perhaps the legendary hero was just the situation in front of him. He really hoped that one day he could become this powerful. Chapter 49, Chapter 0049, Lower Floor. Meeting adventurers in need of rescue was just one episode. As Yami knew in advance, adventurers were a very high-risk occupation, especially those who joined the exploration familiar. The dangers they needed to face every day were unimaginable. Even with the help of your teammates, you never know whether monsters will appear from the corner and bite your head off. Therefore, exploring the dungeon was a kind of destruction to the body and the spirit. Often encountering adventurers alone in danger, Yami didn't mind helping out. He was not a saint. He was just doing it casually. But his actions today were destined to be spread among Oreo. Then, as a member of Hephaestus's familiar, the whole familiar will naturally benefit from it, and the reputation will improve. Word of mouth was very important in a world where news was blocked. This was also one of the few things Yami could do for his familiar. In just half a day, with Yami and Tsubaki sweeping all the monsters, they quickly reached the dungeon record that surpassed Yami's. After crossing the 10th floor, the remaining 2 floors were no longer an obstacle. After beheading an infant dragon with his sword, Yami took out the magic stone inside the infant dragon's body. The dungeon quickly swallowed the monster's body, leaving a scale in place. This was a special drop item belonging to monsters, and it was also an excellent material for making equipment. It's good luck. Along the way, I have already obtained 10 infant dragon scales. The harvest of this dungeon exploration is unimaginable at this speed. Tsubaki quickly picked up the infant dragon scales and skillfully put them into her pocket. This kind of scene had appeared countless times, and Yami never thought that his mature captain would show such money-fanatic behavior. The contrast between before and after was really different, but he found it cute. However, Tsubaki would rush to take them only when special items dropped. Yami, I doubt your luck very much. The probability of special drop items appearing is too high. Tsubaki had been surprised by Yami's strength for a long time. In just half a day, the gains of the two were terrifying. She obviously didn't stay there intentionally, but even if it was just a group of monsters that were eliminated during the journey, The fallen magic stone fragments were of different sizes, but if the size of the magic stone fragments in the orc's body was used as a standard, there are probably a total of 500 pieces as much. In addition, the killer ants, lizard's bones, infant dragon scales, etc. Even for a team of senior adventurers, it was not easy to achieve this kind of achievement, but now it was so easy to do it with Yami alone. The main reason was that the brave skill was too powerful, and it doubled all attributes during the battle. Counting the blessings of other skills, Yami had completely surpassed LV.1 adventurers, and even some weak LV.2 adventurers might not be his opponents. Even though the monsters in the dungeon had special powers and varied in strength, at least for the upper-level monsters, it was absolutely impossible to pose a fatal threat to Yami, and they were completely unrepeatable adventurers. Captain, let's go deeper. Your drive is really high, then keep this momentum and move on. Tsubaki's face showed curiosity. I also want to see where your limit is. The two continued to walk forward quickly and soon passed the stairs. The terrain of the white grassland labyrinth from the 10th to the 11th floor also changed back to the appearance of a dungeon cave with the arrival of the middle floor. However, there were still significant differences between the middle and upper levels. The upper floor of the dungeon was a flat labyrinth passage. A large number of passages were intertwined in such a dense way that you wouldn't know exactly where it would lead. The environment could be considered more three-dimensional on the middle floors. Not only did it cover a large area, but you often had to climb up and down hills, and sometimes you could even see cliffs several meters high. This sudden change in painting style made it difficult for many adventurers to adapt. Even Yami was deeply attracted at first glance. A blue magic stone light was above the cave, and the stalactite hung above their heads, shining like a chandelier. If it weren't for the danger that always existed, you would even think it would be a beautiful tourist attraction. Starting from here is the middle layer of the dungeon. Unlike the upper layer, most monsters in the middle floors have the strength to match the third-level adventurers. Of course, this is not static. Compared with adventurers, the strength of monsters is even more uncertain, and there are special individuals among them, so be vigilant at all times. Of course, if you encounter a monster you can't fight against, it's not over for you. Some places in the middle floors can directly lead to the 18th floor. The safe floor. Keeping track of the location of that place is also one of the compulsory courses for adventurers. After setting foot on the middle floors, Tsubaki's expression became slightly serious. There was no way to stay relaxed. Although Yami's strength exceeded her expectations, she needed to provide timely support if he encountered danger. Therefore, she must maintain a high degree of concentration. A Broken Bar Chapter 50, Chapter 0050. Hellhound. Also, remember to put this thing on. Tsubaki took a piece of clothing that looked like gauze or cloth from the backpack behind her and threw it on Yami's shoulder, who immediately showed a puzzled expression. 1. The memories about Danmachi in his mind had blurred a lot. Apart from remembering some related characters, Yami had forgotten most of the basic information about the monster, so he didn't recognize it. 1. The monsters in the middle layer have begun to have special abilities. The 13th layer is also called the first line of death. There is a black wolf called Hellhound registered in the monster manual of the Adventurers Guild. It can shoot out flames and turn the unprotected adventurers into charcoal. This thing is called fire-resistant cloth. In a sense, it is a piece of standard equipment on the middle floors. It has extremely strong resistance to flames and high temperatures and can withstand most flame damage. 1 fire-resistant cloth. With Tsubaki's reminder, Yami remembered the function of this thing. It was woven from protective cloth, a garment made by fairy spirits weaving their magic power. It is also a special item with the blessing of fairy spirits. In addition to having a high defense against attacks such as flames and heat, it also has cold protection properties. It could be said to be a must for middle floors. 1. Don't look at it, it's not expensive, only 6 figures. I've kept this one for you temporarily, so remember to return it to me later. Yami nodded and put the fine cloth under the armor. The surface of the protective cloth was dotted with bright particles of light, and the colors were bright, making it look extremely pretty. It's worthy of being the equipment produced by the cooperation of fairies. It feels that even senior blacksmiths can't match it. It's not unreasonable for this race to be called God Clone. It was just that although the performance of this kind of work was powerful, it had a single function, and it could only surpass the armor of a senior blacksmith in the field of specialization. But it was still very powerful. Don't worry, you will have a chance to meet that magical group someday. Tsubaki patted Yami's shoulder and walked forward first. The latter tightened the fire-resistant cloth on his body, couldn't help smiling, and followed without hesitation. Gray rocks were rolling everywhere around. The surrounding walls, floors, and ceilings were all made of rocks, with a little moist air floating around. The middle layer was also a natural cave on the mountainside. Some people who knew nothing about it might come here and believe this description. It had to be said that Yami felt a little nervous when he came here. He also wanted to see what was so special about the middle floors, known as the first line of death, and how powerful the Hellhound, who also had the alias of Pyromaniac, was. All in all, Hellhound was probably the middle floor opponent needing special attention. Of course, if there were monsters like the Minotaur, it wouldn't be that important. Yami and Tsubaki walked in a single passage like a cave. This process lasted about 10 minutes without encountering any monsters on the way. But when this thought appeared in their hearts, the two of them stopped almost at the same time. The status strengthening was extremely comprehensive. Even Yami's 5 senses had been greatly enhanced. Yami could easily sense that something was running from a distance. The sound of pata-pata footsteps was very obvious in this silent environment. It came right after I finished speaking, and I'll see you perform next. Remember to ask for help if you can't hold on. Tsubaki looked sideways at Yami but only got a confident nod from him. She suddenly chuckled, knowing that the situation of calling for help would probably not happen. However, Tsubaki would still not stand idly by if Yami was in danger. The faint phosphorescence reflected several figures, and the shadows reflected on the stone wall of the cave, gradually elongated with the sound of footsteps, and then all the figures fully appeared from the depths of the passage. Many pairs of scarlet eyes appeared, walking out of the darkness without haste. These were hellhounds, which were also adventurer killers. Its uneven skin was wrapped in black hair, and its exposed sharp teeth highlighted its horror. The hellhound had a ferocious face different from that of a wolf, and just after it appeared, it bared its teeth and let out a low growl. Yami had a panoramic view of everything and couldn't help but let out a sound of wonder in his heart. Honestly, the hellhound in front of him was bigger than all the dogs he had seen in his previous life, and those 4 strong dog legs alone were already thicker than most animals. If someone said that the one in front of him was a cow, Yami would believe it. The appearance is bluffing, but I don't know its strength, so let's try it out first. Even though he was confident enough in his strength, Yami did not take it lightly. The long sword at his waist was slowly drawn out, and the sound produced by the friction was like a command. The hellhounds almost simultaneously let out a loud roar and rushed over with astonishing momentum. The two-way rush between each other instantly covered the short distance of 100 meters. A hellhound took the lead, leapt across the sky, and rushed toward Yami. The latter did not dodge, and the long sword in his hand slashed at the bloody mouth of the hellhound. He wanted to try to see how powerful the hellhound was. Boom! Fighting close to each other, Yami almost couldn't control his figure due to the hellhound's huge strength. His face suddenly sank as he was pushed back. A Broken Bar. Chapter 51, Chapter 0051, Dance of the Fire God. Damn it! Feeling the huge force transmitted from the long sword, Yami's face sank slightly, and he stepped back 2 steps in succession, only then managing to stabilize himself. And the hellhound, which had completely lost its power, was also hovering in midair. Its strength is really great. It is not wise to face the enemy head-on, but if it is for training my stats, it is a good goal, but now is not the time to train them. Noticing that the other hellhounds were rushing from other directions, Yami was about to withdraw. However, when he wanted to regain the long sword, He found that it had been bitten by the first hellhound and didn't intend to let go. He seemed to want to use this method to buy time for the rest of the hellhounds. Is there even an improvement in the wisdom of the monsters? Unable to take back the long sword quickly, Yami let go of the sword rationally after analyzing the situation and hurriedly retreated to the rear. The next moment, the hellhound dogs landed one after another, and the ground suddenly splashed dust due to the heavy impact. The ground was sunken, partly visible to the naked eye. From this, we can see how powerful the hellhounds are. If he didn't dodge successfully, he might have been torn to pieces by these dogs. How is it, Yami? Do you need my help? Tsubaki asked from a distance. Her voice sounded like she was gloating. Maybe seeing newcomer adventurers deflated was the source of her interest. Yami rolled his eyes, ignoring the faint smile on Tsubaki's mouth. I don't need it for the time being, Captain. It's just a few puppies. I can deal with them, so I won't bother you. Oh, is that so? But your weapon has been lost. Do you need me to lend you one? No need. Just watch. Rejecting Tsubaki's kindness again, Yami's eyes fell on the hellhound again, and the original thought of probing was completely dissipated at this moment. Strength and speed had already been clearly understood, so there was no need to continue playing around. A dog that breathes fire? Then let me see whether your flame is stronger or mine is stronger. Stretching out his hand towards the void, the Nichiren sword appeared in Yami's hand. There was a clear sound of drawing a sword, and Tsubaki's eyes lit up again after witnessing everything. She found that the little guy in front of her had more and more secrets. Not only was he powerful, but he could also avoid the hellhound attack, and now he seemed to have storage magic. Not only that, but the quality of his sword was also excellent, and it was getting better and better. How much surprise can you bring me? Even Tsubaki didn't realize it. Unconsciously, Yami's actions seemed to be able to affect her emotional changes, and she became more and more curious about this newcomer. On the other side, seemingly understanding Yami's provocation, the hellhounds became irritated. Yami saw them rubbing the ground lightly with their hind legs, and after another astonishing roar, they attacked side by side in no particular order, almost completely blocking the front direction. Yami had been waiting for this time for a long time. Using the transparent world, he could see the body structure of the hellhound clearly, and even the location of the magic stone could not be concealed. The blood flow and the muscles vibration of the hellhounds could be seen in Yami's eyes. He could clearly grasp the hellhounds' weaknesses and, at the same time, had a clear prediction of their actions. I see it. Dance of the Fire Goda Burning Bones. Summer Sun. The Nichiren sword in Yami's hand flew across at high speed, and the flame formed halfway wrapped around the sword and then showed a strange track, spewing towards all directions. The slash with flames unceremoniously rewarded the hellhound's body with a blow. Ru-ah! The three dogs cry miserably, and then their bodies were cut in two from the center. Red and black blood spewed out, and the monster whose upper body and lower body were divided into two fell to the ground with a thud. Most of the magic stone in its body was exposed, but it did not suffer any damage. The remaining three hellhounds hurriedly braked to stop their forward movement, trying to maintain a distance. Seeing that they raised their upper body and lowered their lower body almost simultaneously, Yami, who was very sensitive to solar energy, naturally sensed that they were accumulating flames. Sparks gathered in the hellhound's bloody mouth, about to overflow from the gap in the mouth where the fangs were exposed. However, this spellcasting was too long. Squatting down slightly to accumulate energy, Yami's figure instantly disappeared in place, leaving only two deep footprints on the ground. Dance of the Fire Goda Raging Sun. A vortex-like sea of AA flames appeared out of thin air, swallowing all the hellhounds in an instant, and they couldn't even eject the flames that had been accumulated in their mouths for a long time. The hellhound that once burned countless adventurers to death had now tasted the taste of being swallowed by flames. The terrifying flames swirled forward and hit the wall of the cave, leaving a dark trace on the wall, and the surrounding air became even hotter. At this moment, Yami was like the king of fire. A Broken Bar. Chapter 52, Chapter 0052, Monster Feast. In an instant, The battle was over. The atmosphere on the labyrinth floor began to become hotter around Yami. The stalactites initially hanging above occasionally dripped some corrosive liquid, but as the water vapor in the air evaporated, the dripping frequency began to slow down. But the dark environment was lit up at that moment. As the flame vortex dissipated, the figures of the remaining hellhounds were utterly wiped out, and after the remaining fire was extinguished, only a few blue-black magic stones were left on the ground. Yami swung the niche iron sword in his hand, and the flames wrapped around it slowly disappeared. As the blade was sheathed, he couldn't help but sigh a long sigh of relief. The atmosphere was a little tense but didn't require much effort. Although the hellhounds were called the obstacle to conquering the 13th floor, they were not as powerful as imagined, especially in the situation where they needed to concentrate energy before spraying flames. The threat was even less. Dance of the Fire God is indeed the original breathing method created by Orochi Tsujikuni. It is unreasonable to say that it will have no problem with magic, and even the speed has been significantly improved. Picking up all the magic stones from the ground, Yami put them into his pocket. At this time, Tsubaki, who had been silently watching the battle, also stepped forward, grabbed his shoulders, and pulled him into her arms forcefully. "You are so capable, boy. You are more powerful than I imagined. You have space storage magic, and you have sword skills that are comparable to magic. I am amazed. You really have not received Falna before, right?" Suffering from Tsubaki's sudden hug attack, Yami was obviously at a loss. Smelling the fragrance close at hand, he gave a dry cough and could only reply in a low voice, "Of course. This is the first time I have received Falna. Even if I wanted to hide it, Hephaestus-sama could see it." "That makes sense. Then the Hephaestus familiar really found a treasure." With an excited smile, Tsubaki rubbed Yami's hair vigorously. The latter wanted to break free, but their strength gap was too great. He had no choice. He could only show a loveless expression and let Tsubaki play with him wantonly. Fortunately, this situation did not last too long. After playing with his hair for a few minutes, Tsubaki finally let go of him, and Yami broke away from her embrace as if he had been given freedom for the first time. His clothes and hair were messed up. This feeling of being unable to fight and do anything was really uncomfortable. "Ha ha ha, I'm sorry. I won't do it next time. Let's move on. This time the goal is to reach the 18th floor. Let's start the forging of this exploration there." Set off, with a faint smile, Tsubaki took the lead and walked forward. "Really? Whether it's Hephaestus-sama or the captain, it feels like I can't escape them." Was it really a wise decision to join this family? Although he said so, Yami followed Tsubaki quickly without stopping. Not too far away, many monsters appeared one after another, and even the passage leading to the 14th floor gathered many monsters, blocking the progress of the adventurers. In addition to the hellhound, there were also needle rabbits. One long dangling ears, yellow and white fur, fluffy tails, a sharp horn on the forehead, standing on hind feet. Their body size was about the same as that of the Palam tribe. Although they looked very docile on the outside, they were actually very aggressive and often appeared in groups. "What a huge number." "Is it a monster wave?" Tsubaki frowned slightly. This amount of monsters was not only very troublesome but also a waste of time. Plus no one knew whether there were mutants hidden in it. One Yami, on the side, didn't speak, but he didn't dare to take it too lightly. With this amount, in addition to hellhounds and needle rabbits who were good at team battles, plus hard-armored with great defenses, even a group of average level 2 adventurers would suffer at their hands. "Captain, do we need to bypass them?" Bypassing was not really bypassing but diverting a huge group of monsters away and then directly entering the next level. "No, that's not efficient, and there's no guarantee that we can bypass them. Instead of doing useless work, it's better to clear them all in one fell swoop." A bright smile appeared on Tsubaki's face while rubbing her fists. "Captain, you..." Realizing something, Yami slowly raised his head, his eyes flickering with anticipation. "You have shown your strength, so as the family captain, I will naturally let you, a newcomer, see the strength of a 5th-level adventurer. So watch carefully." After her words fell, Tsubaki held her weapon and slowly walked towards the group of monsters. One person against one group. Countless figures suddenly started a head-on conflict. Chapter 53, Chapter 0053, Loki Familiar. The 18th floor of the underground city. After some rest, the Loki family members stationed here for a night gathered. The team that seemed a little lazy became ready instantly. The leader, a blonde Palom, was directing all the members. The short blonde hair was very conspicuous under the light. Although his appearance was of a young boy, the consequences would be very serious if you underestimated him. I can finally rest for a few days. By the way, do we really have to stay so long to level this time? Although there are special supporters from the family to provide supplies and craftsmen from the Hephaestus familiar to provide repairs, we stay here every day. Inside the dungeon, it is really boring. Looking at the passage leading to the 17th floor, Shna sighed expectantly with her hands on her hips. Even though this was not a group expedition of the family members, it was also very hard during the period. They faced the monster wave several times. Fortunately, Finn and Reveria were in the team, plus many LV.5 adventurers saved the day with tacit cooperation. It was a rare rest. With everyone's agreement, they returned to the 18th floor. They planned to rest 12 for a day or two before entering the deep level area to train again. After going back this time, they will definitely experience a considerable improvement. Shana, don't complain. As an adventurer, isn't it part of our duty to explore dungeons? Shin looked at her very homesick and mischievous younger sister. She couldn't help but reprimand her by hitting her on the head. Although Shana was slightly dissatisfied with being knocked on the head, she could only pat her head and mutter, "But it's the truth, and you won't allow me to even talk about it." By the way, AIs, do you miss Aurorio's life, such as food? Shana, bored at her sister's response, could only change her target. She ran behind Eyes and wrapped her hands around her, and asked softly in the other party's ear. This question stunned Eyes, who was expressionless and seemed to think of some kind of food in her mind. But soon, this longing was again overwhelmed by another emotion. No, I still want to continue fighting. I want to become stronger. The girl's voice didn't contain any emotion, but it could make people hear the firmness hidden in it, which made Shana, who was a little out of interest, feel very wrong immediately. She seemed to have forgotten that the girl before her was dedicated to only one goal in her life. No, Eyes, we have been fighting intensively for several days and must rest for a while. We will not return to the ground immediately, so you don't have to worry that you can't fight, but at least in these few days, you must have a good rest. Do you understand? A serious voice sounded suddenly, and Reveria appeared behind them at some point. The stern words made Shana, who was a little jumpy just now, shrink herself. Eyes slowly raised her head as if she had understood Reveria's message and could only nod slightly. Understood, Reveria. It's good that you know. To prevent you from messing around, I will keep an eye on you during this time. Reveria is so strict. It is necessary to be strict with you. Hurry up and rest. After the words fell, Reveria turned and left. However, the lingering strictness she left behind remained, which made Eyes, who had become active because of Shana's words, suddenly sigh. She couldn't continue to fight, so she completely lost her motivation. A broken Bamu. There was a deafening roar. Yami and Tsubaki have arrived at the 15th floor of the dungeon. In addition to the needle rabbits, hellhounds, and hard-armored, a new monster had appeared here. The whole body was full of muscles. It was a Minotaur. It was an extremely powerful monster, not only powerful but also had amazing defense. Thick fur wrapped around the Minotaur's body, and weak adventurers couldn't break through its defenses. Even if you left scars on it, you couldn't restrict the Minotaur's movement, as the pain would stimulate its ferocity even more. The Minotaur could be regarded as the top elite monster on the middle floors. One-on-one, it was also difficult for LV.2 adventurers of the same level to win. Of course, this was not absolute. What Yami was facing now was a lone Minotaur. When they found this huge and strong monster, Tsubaki chose to distance herself as always, and she wanted to see if Yami could handle it by himself. After seeing Tsubaki's strength, Yami, who felt a sense of urgency again, naturally agreed without hesitation. He wanted to become stronger quickly, and the Minotaur in front of him was a good training object. This big guy was difficult to deal with for him now. But if he could defeat the Minotaur in front of him, in that case, he would definitely be able to accumulate enough stats and fauna required for upgrading. The premise was that Yami could defeat the Minotaur in front of him with his own hands. A Broken Bar Chapter 54, Chapter 0054, Powerful Minotaur. The Minotaur, the legendary monster. In his previous life, Yami had also heard of the existence of this thing, but now it appeared before his eyes. Although the Minotaur was only at LV.2 level, with Yami's current LV.1 stats, even with the increase by bravery skill, it was still difficult to cut through it with a niche iron sword. The protagonist's lifelong enemy was not just talk. However, if he relied on skills, he would not be helpless in front of this monster. Moo. Without much time to think, the Minotaur raised his head to the sky and screamed loudly, and then he rushed towards Yami with his scarlet eyes gleaming with menacing light. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Yami didn't feel it was as fast as he had thought. Perhaps, the Minotaur was not a speed monster at all. If this is the case, it may be easier to deal with than imagined. However, it is rare to meet a lone Minotaur. So you will help me increase my stats. Yami's eyes revealed a raging fighting spirit. Stomping heavily, Yami, who suddenly accelerated, came first for the attack and quickly appeared before the Minotaur, dodging the fist bigger than his head sideways and slashing down. Puff! The blade pierced the flesh, but the attack did not achieve the expected effect this time. Although it entered the Minotaur's arm, it was clamped by its dense muscles, preventing it from moving forward. This kind of physical strength was really terrifying. Not only that, the power displayed by the Minotaur was even more terrifying than the Hellhound. FK, why do you have to be so exaggerated? Your muscle density is too outrageous. Yami subconsciously complained, but the next moment his face turned pale. The Minotaur punched again. Yami quickly jumped up and, while avoiding the fist, put his feet on the Minotaur's arm, pulled out the niche iron sword with all his strength, and slashed at the Minotaur's head again. The latter raised his big fan-like hand to block the attack, and the man and the beast instantly separated. Looking at the Minotaur, who had no obvious scars, Yami's expression became slightly serious. This was really a formidable enemy. While thinking about this in his heart, Yami suddenly felt something warm on his cheek. He wiped it with his left hand. What he touched was scarlet blood, which seemed to flow from his face. Was it when I avoided it just now? Even though he missed the hit, could the wind generated from the fist alone hurt him? It really has a terrifying strength. If it hits me directly, I'm afraid I would have to say bye to my life. With a flick of the left hand, most of the blood on the hand was thrown to the ground, but there were still obvious marks on the palm, but these were not important anymore. In other words, he no longer had the energy to pay attention to other things. Only fighting was important in his mind right now. Dance of the Fire God, first former fire dance. Their figure disappeared, and Yami and the Minotaur fought hand to blade again. This time, the blade burning with the scorching sun's fire instantly slashed the Minotaur's arm, leaving 2 scars with deep bone visible, and the flames were still burning its body. The severe pain caused the Minotaur to roar, and the scarlet light in his eyes became deeper and deeper. You're angry? Then come. Dance of the Fire God. A middle dot third form. A middle dot raging sun. The high-speed slashes spread all over the Minotaur's body, intertwined with the same dense fist wind of the Minotaur, and there was a crisp impact sound, and each impact also shot out a lot of fire. The strength originating from the Minotaur, with Yami's swing of the sword, not only part of it was transferred, but also part of the strength was returned to the Minotaur himself. Under the flow, Yami's hands were numb, but the Minotaur's fist had been damaged a lot. However, this monster with muscles in its brain still didn't feel any fear, and the strength in its hands not only didn't weaken at all but increased a bit. It seemed that it thought that he was not hurt but someone else. Seeing this scene, Yami also showed determination in his eyes. Since the monster wanted to fight head-to-head, Who was he to be afraid? Dance of the Fire Goda, Fake Rainbow. Dance of the Fire Goda, Fire Wheel. Dance of the Fire Goda, Solar Heat Haze. Dance of the Fire Goda, Sunflower Thrust. Dance of the Fire God A Middle Dot, Beneficent Radiance. Dance of the Fire God A Middle Dot, Flame Dance. Dance of the Fire Goda with many sword moves. Yami fought more happily, and the power of the dance of the fire god was constantly displayed. Flames surrounded him as if he was dancing in the fire. But just when he was about to continue, his movement stopped suddenly. He wasn't exhausted, but the Minotaur was covered in bruises and fell to the ground, overwhelmed. Even so, this Minotaur was still struggling to get up. It could have become a capable fighter if it was a little smarter. Pity. However, I enjoyed this battle very much. I will remember you, Minotaur. Now die with peace of mind. With his slightly sore body dragging, Yami stepped forward slowly, raised the niche iron sword with both hands and then dropped it suddenly. Dance of the Fire Goda Dance. The flaming blade flashed away, and the Minotaur's neck was cut off instantly. The Minotaur's sinful life was ended. Chapter 55, Chapter 0055, 18th Floor, Safe Floor. Rivera Town. Defeating the Minotaur was, in general, a cause for celebration. Yami may also be able to appreciate the unique charm of the adventurer in the set. Continuously using the sun breathing did not cause too much burden on his current body, but there was still a certain degree of fatigue, especially fighting against powerful monsters, which was even more difficult. After all, the Minotaur was tough to deal with at his current level. In the following section, Yami and Tsubaki continued to move forward, overcoming almost all obstacles. No matter what kind of monsters, they didn't stop their progress. Of course, this was also the reason why the monster wave did not reappear. Although the monster attacks never stopped, and the strength of the monsters was also rising, with Tsubaki's support, the two quickly advanced to the 17th floor. If not for the lack of physical and mental strength, Yami might have been able to participate in more battles. It looks like I will have to buy some potions when I return this time. Whether it's a potion related to physical, mental, or injury recovery, they will be very helpful for exploring the dungeon. However, these could only be easily realized after having sufficient funds. At least for now, he might not be able to afford more expensive potions. For example, a potion called Panacea could restore all internal and external injuries. It claims that as long as one breath is left, it could save you and remove all negative effects. The price alone had reached 500,000 villas. This may be an amount that some adventurers could not save in their entire lives. Therefore, adventurers were not rich and often needed to work hard for money. A broken barrow. We're finally here. As the passage in front of them became wider and wider, Tsubaki turned her head and said to Yami. A square-like hall soon appeared in front of the two of them. Compared with the other messy dungeon caves, it was much smoother, although only a little bit. There were still many huge stones on the square. Just placing them there made people feel small. Did you see the wall on the left? Walking into the hall, Tsubaki started teaching again. That wall is the Wall of Size, also called the first boss, where Goliath, the boss of the floor, is spawned. It is equivalent to an LV.4 monster, but it is difficult for adventurers of the same level to defeat. The floor bosses will appear on every other floor. Each one is powerful, and the respawn time is longer than other monsters. It seems that Goliath has been solved by other adventurers and has not been respawned yet. Since there is nothing to see, let's go to the 18th floor. It's time to start another lesson. Hearing this, Yami nodded and took his gaze away from the wall. This wall, which seemed to have been polished by someone, was spectacular. It was hard to imagine who could have made such a wonderful and varied dungeon. It was a pity that there seemed no way to see Goliath this time. Without staying there any longer, walking through the long hall, the two soon entered the passage leading to the lower floor. After passing through the dark stairs, the long-lost light appeared before Yami's eyes. After finally getting used to it, he was attracted by the dense forest before him. This was the 18th floor of the dungeon, which was also the so-called safe floor. Adventurers like to call it Dungeon Paradise. The afterglow of the evening rose from a distance, and it seemed that the sun rose and the moon that had set on the ground had been restored here. Although it was only a simulation, it did make people feel safe. Generally, no monsters would appear on the safe floor, so it had become the gathering place for many familiar members. After Yami and Tsubaki entered this floor, they entered a town marked Rivera. Different from the bustling Orario, the town of Rivera looked relatively simple. The first thing you see is the simple wooden houses, many pedestrians selling fruits around, and some slightly sturdy hotels. The chatter and laughter of the adventurers came from the tavern not far away, and from time to time, the sound of forging iron could be heard. This very familiar sound attracted Yami's attention. Not far away, in the workshop, some adventurers were standing at the workshop's entrance and were constantly bargaining. Many people had even lived here for several years. Orario's business was too complicated. Some businessmen thought they had found another way and hired adventurers to escort them to Rivera town to do business. Although it was very dangerous and occasionally destroyed, it was not as terrible as imagined. The people who could settle here were veterans, and they knew what to do and when to save their lives. Surprised? When I first came to Rivera, I also showed the same expression as you. Yami's silence was disturbed by Tsubaki's mistake for coming here for the first time, and then she said, "Our Hephaestus familiar also has property here. Let's go there first and settle down. Then I will slowly explain to you the origin of this town. Come with me." A Broken Bar Chapter 56, Chapter 0056, You must never steal things. But if you want to steal, be sure not to be discovered. In Orari's dungeon, monsters on most floors would be respawned regularly after being eliminated to fill the gaps in each floor and prevent adventurers from continuing to go deeper. To enter the dungeon, you had to enter through the entrance in Orario, and if you wanted to get out, you had to go up through the passages of each floor. You need to go through the corresponding floors whether you were entering or leaving. There was no so-called archive point outside the special floor-skipping passages. After all, this was the real world. Even if Falna gave the adventurer a game-like status panel, it was nothing more than that. Therefore, the term expedition appeared. But the dungeon started from the middle level, and the monsters refreshed intensively were very troublesome for adventurers. During this period, the loss of equipment and supplies was extremely huge, and the occasional monster wave was an important reason preventing adventurers from going on expeditions. Perhaps because of the idea of a balance, there was not a glimmer of life in the dungeon. During the exploration process, the adventurers were surprised to find the existence of the safe floor. Monsters would not be spawned here, and monsters from other floors would unlikely come here. Therefore this temporary safe floor composed of adventurers, the town of Rivera, was born. In fact, the safe floor was not just the 18th floor. There were safe floors for every other fixed floor that would not spawn monsters. The known ones were the 18th, 39th, and the 50th floors. Of course, between the 28th and 30th floors, there seemed to be a safe floor. Yami didn't know if it was true. Still, according to the rumor, the rooms behind the boss floor were usually very likely to be safe floors, so there should be safe floors on the 20 or so floors. These were things for the future. Yami cannot go to such a deep place now. The general situation is like this. In the temporary residence of the Hephaestus familiar, Tsubaki explained with a flat face. This workshop is the property of the Hephaestus familiar in the town of Rivera, and it specializes in providing weapon repair and weapon sales for passing adventurers. As a familiar of artisans, this could be regarded as a long-term job. Basically, the Hephaestus familiar and the Goibniu familiar divided up most of Orio's forging business, and the other forging families shared the rest equally. For this reason, the Hephaestus familiar was also very famous in the entire labyrinth city. There is also day and night on the safe floor, but it is not day and night in the true sense. There is a special crystal here. By absorbing the magic power of the dungeon, it releases light for lighting and enhances the light. The attenuation creates the difference between day and night, and you get used to it later. Tsubaki seemed to have thought of something suddenly and hurriedly reminded him with a serious expression. The safe floor also has many mineral resources, including the crystal mine on the ground and the marcasite left on the wall. They are all very good basic materials, but you must not collect them. That will affect the situation in the town of Rivera, and it will cause public outrage. Captain, do you really think of me as a greedy person? Yami showed a helpless expression. He was not so hungry for money, although he didn't know that there was such a benefit on the safe floor at the beginning, and it was really exciting to be mentioned by Tsubaki suddenly, but he would not do such a thing rashly. At least he would wait until no one was there. Anyway, I've already told you that you must not do that kind of thing. Even if you do, you must not be discovered by other familiar members, and don't take it all away, understand? Seemingly aware of Yami's temperament, Tsubaki even went out of her way to give such a warning. This time, Yami did not respond. He was unsure whether he would take away the materials, and even if he would definitely choose a time when no one was around. Well, forget it, as long as you know what's right. Tsubaki shook her head helplessly, feeling that the boy in front of her would be a problem child, and hoped that he would not bring too much trouble to their goddess Hephaestus. Although, there was not only one problem child in the familiar. Okay, let's talk about other things later. Now, do you need to rest for a while? The fighting along the way was really tiring. Why don't you rest for a night, and we will formally start forging tomorrow. Roger that, Captain. For Tsubaki's proposal, Yami naturally had no reason to refuse. As the other party said, fighting was really exhausting, and there was no place for them to rest in the dungeon. If they continued to forge with high intensity, it would not be uncommon for you to faint. Forging was not that urgent at this moment. He could have a good night's rest first. After the conversation, Tsubaki arranged a spare room for Yami, then turned and left. Yami was physically and mentally exhausted and had no time to care about other things. He closed the door and lay on the bed, his eyes tightly closed, instantly falling into a deep sleep. Soon, there was a soft snoring sound in the room, which complemented the lively scene outside the room. Chapter 57, Chapter 0057, Pleasant scenery at night on the safe floor. The lights on the floor were completely dimmed. In technical terms, it was night. The Hephaestus familiar was placed in a temporary residence in Rivera town. Yami faintly woke up from his sleep. The strange ceiling instantly made his confused eyes clear. He subconsciously sat up, looked around vigilantly, and found no danger. At the same time, the memories in my mind began to return quickly. Phew. It's a bit of a fuss. I followed Tsubaki to the dungeon and reached the safe floor. This is the temporary residence of the familiar, and there is no danger. Taking a long breath, the tense muscles on Yami's body slowly relaxed. Sure enough, after experiencing too much fierce battle, people would become a little mentally disturbed. Although Aurelio was amazing, every year, there would be adventurers who couldn't accept too fierce battles or, after experiencing some kind of life change, would become mentally disturbed. Everyone looked crazy, so no one thought that the occupation as adventurers was beautiful. It had all kinds of hidden dangers for a person to face. Yami slowly experienced this feeling, but he was not worried that he would be affected. Leaving aside his confidence, just because of the effect of the brave skill, he was doomed to be a natural fighter. And the only way to die in this life was to die in a fierce battle. There was probably no other way of dying than this. It seems to be late at night outside now. Is that why it's night on the safe floor? Sitting upright on the bed, Yami subconsciously looked out through the window. The sky was pitch black, but the dots of starlight hanging above the cave embellished the environment with incomparable splendor. Already fully awake, Yami, who was not at all sleepy at this time, couldn't help thinking of going out for a walk. Even though it was late at night, Rivera town was still lively. Many adventurers who explored deeper floors chose to return here one after another, ignoring the concept of time, and gathered in twos and threes, shouting and laughing. In many people's eyes, this might be the romance for adventurers, but Yami only thought they were noisy. Putting on his coat, Yami left the station. He could vaguely hear the clanging sound coming from inside when passing by other rooms. It should be said that they were members of Hephaestus's familiar. Although he had never seen those people, judging from their current performance, this was the real blacksmith. In comparison, Yami was more like a member of the exploration familiar. But that being said, if I were to stay in one room all day and concentrate on blacksmithing, it would be a kind of torture. Occasionally doing forging is okay, but if I take it as my main job, I will go crazy. Shaking his head helplessly, Yami could only admire these blacksmiths who could bear this torture. This was probably the difference in interest between people. Quickly leaving the area of other residents and passing through the noisy crowd on the street, Yami chose to leave Rivera town, chose a relatively quiet direction at random, and walked leisurely. Before he knew it, he had already left the confines of the town and came to an uninhabited area. The 18th floor was larger than he had imagined. It was not only in the town of Rivera that adventurers lived. There were also adventurers stationed in this kind of suburban area. Some adventurers disliked noisy places and preferred to be stationed outside the town. Although living here might not be as good as Rivera town, and life was inconvenient, everyone had their own preferences. In fact, the scenery in the suburbs was often more charming. Standing on the plain, feeling the breeze blowing from a distance, the comfort was like a mother stroking her child's hair. Yami subconsciously closed his eyes and opened his arms. Feeling this long-lost comfort, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. The air was fresh, and the scenery was pleasant, suitable for picnics. It was a pity he came here too hastily this time and didn't bring suitable tools. Otherwise, he could have enjoyed the rare and hard-won tranquility on this pleasant night. In other words, since he came to Orrio, he really hadn't enjoyed life well. Although it didn't take him too long to become an adventurer, since joining the Hephaestus Familiar, every day was either learning to forge or entering the dungeon for leveling. Every day was really busy. Honestly, none of the pictures he envisioned in advance had ever happened. Entering the dangerous dungeon and facing the roar of the monsters, the superb swordsmanship came out one after another, saving the rest of the adventurers from the monsters and then killing monsters with one blow, leaving only the cute girl sitting on the ground. Talk about adventures with cute girls in the tavern. Meet a beautiful elf girl, solve her troubles, prevent her from being harassed by rough people, and form a team with cheerful and eclectic Amazon girls. Shuttle through the dangerous dungeon, followed by the supporter Palom girls. During the day and night, the feelings for all the girls became stronger and stronger, finally living happily with the goddess waiting for his return. That kind of picture was beautiful enough. Chapter 58, Chapter 0058, A Waterfall. But coming into the world of swords and magic, there are not so many wonderful encounters as imagined. Shaking his head amusedly, Yami couldn't help but wonder in his heart, when did he become so sentimental? It was really strange. Moreover, now was not the time to think about these things. Although the current Orrio was not in danger, it was not absolutely safe. When the real protagonist, Belcrinal, the last hero of mankind, appears, the plot goes wild. At that time, whether it was heresy or Freya's actions, Orrio would be thrown into chaos. Simply put, Yami must have sufficient strength at least before this period. He was still weak today and couldn't guarantee his safety on the middle floors. He would have to take advantage of this time to train himself in the dungeon. A broken bar in the morning, he followed Tsubaki to continue learning to forge. He went to the 16th or 15th floor in the afternoon to fight the Minotaurs. In the evening, he returned to the safe floor to rest and replenish supplies. At least a long-term stay in the dungeon was required. It would be even better to accumulate enough proficiency and achievements to level up when he leaves the dungeon and returns to the surface. If it doesn't work, he won't force it too much. Even if he couldn't break the limits of the adventurer's stats, like Belen would lag behind in the growth of basic physical fitness. His biggest reliance is to travel through the simulation system. If other powerful worlds could be simulated in the future, the lag in this aspect could be ignored. For example, the physical strength of the world of One Piece was not worse than that of this world, or maybe it was even stronger. Time is really tight enough. The skills I have acquired only give me the possibility to become stronger, but if I want to become a really strong person, I still need to take one step at a time. After a little enlightenment in his heart, Yami couldn't help but feel the anticipation in his heart. He couldn't wait to level up. Huh? There seems to be the sound of water flowing over there. Is there a pool of water in the dungeon, or is it only on the safe floor? The sound of running water was captured by Yami's ears very clearly. The water quality of the streams in the mountains and forests was soft and cold. It was the most suitable for soaking in it after exhaustion. The experience was absolutely indescribable. Yami's eyes lit up suddenly. He even turned his direction and rushed towards the place where the sound came from. He had already entered the forest. As it continued to go deeper, the top of Yami was completely covered by a huge tree branch and leaf, and some trees were hung with sparse crystals. The faint light fell through the gaps in the leaves and shone on Yami's body, forming mottled shadows. In addition, blue crystals also grew from the cracks in the rocks on the ground, and through the dewdrops on the vegetation, they radiated colorful brilliance, making the night look even more beautiful. The sound of flowing water became an uproar in Yami's ear cavity as he got closer and closer. Yami's heart also became more and more looking forward to it. It seemed that it was not as simple as a small pool. It seemed that he had found a very amazing place, and the safe floor was full of surprises. Maybe some precious ores could be found in these places. It's here. It really is a waterfall. Pushing aside the dense branches and leaves, Yami was immediately amazed by the beautiful scenery. The first thing that caught his eye was a purely natural waterfall. The water flowing down from the cliff was spacious, with a height of about 20 meters. There was also a huge pool under the waterfall. The water in the pool was clear and bright. Even at night, when the light was not bright, you could still see the bottom of the pool. Many strange aquatic creatures played happily under the water's surface. Occasionally, some of them were frightened by the falling water and rushed to disperse, which was completely a natural scene. Seeing this scene, the genes hidden in Yami's bones also started to move. He inexplicably wanted to compose a poem. Then he took a deep breath and said loudly, "Waterfall flows across the rocks. The beauty seems to make time stop. A waterfall stands so tall, a beauty not often saw." 5. Good poem. One simply satisfying his interest, Yami didn't hesitate any longer and even took off his coat, leaving only the innermost set of clothes, and then jumped into the pool directly. The moment he entered the water, the cool touch hit instantly, making him involuntarily tremble slightly. His previous life memories made Yami instantly recall his swimming skills. Coupled with his strong physical fitness, he had surpassed the so-called world champion in his previous life, swimming happily in the pool like a fish. He didn't know how long he held his breath underwater, but in Yami's perception, he had swum a long distance. Just then, he seemed to hit something. When he surfaced subconsciously, what greeted him was a piercing scream accompanied by fists. A Broken Bar. Chapter 59, Chapter 0059, Isn't my dream encounter coming soon? Kaya! A crisp scream sounded, which startled Yami, who had just surfaced. He hurriedly opened his eyes, but before he could see what was going on, he watched a fist the size of a sandbag attack him, and he even forgot to dodge in his haste. Boo! The fist precisely hit Yami's right eye socket. The force was not as strong as expected, but it still made his brain feel dizzy. After all, the eyes were a fragile part of the human body. Even if Yami had been strengthened by the stats, it was still limited. What happened? Covering his eyes, Yami subconsciously looked forward. An incomparably beautiful scenery is directly printed in his eyes. The long golden yellow hair was scattered on the water's surface, and the pointed ears told the woman's identity before him. She was a beautiful elf girl. Her naked body was hidden under the water. The girl's cheeks were flushed, and her eyes were moist while blocking her key parts with both hands, looking at Yami, who suddenly appeared in panic. This beautiful elf girl was about to cry. Looking at the situation before him, Yami probably also realized what the situation was now. He had complained not long ago that he hadn't had a romantic encounter, and it turned out that the encounter was here. Although the timing of the encounter was not particularly suitable. Who knew that someone came under this waterfall ahead of time, playing in the pool, and it was actually a person of the opposite sex? This joke was a bit big. This is a misunderstanding. I didn't know you were here. I'm really sorry. The soreness in his eyes gradually dissipated. In fact, Yami couldn't control so much now. He seemed to recognize the identity of the beautiful elf girl in front of him. If this matter was not handled well, it would be big. He didn't have the strength now to deal with the revenge of the Loki family. Not to mention that Loki, the main god of the Loki family, was also a god who liked to harass beautiful girls, especially the female adventurers of her own family, and regarded them as her treasure. If she let Loki know about what happened today at Broken Bar, it would be really bad for him. As one of the two most powerful families of Orario, the strength of the Loki family was unquestionable. Maybe the other party would not care too much for his goddess Hephaestus' sake, but secretly they would think about Yami's death with 1,000 cuts. Being able to rely on her intelligence to make the most of the gods dare not provoke her, Yami had no confidence to solve this troublesome matter. So the most urgent task now is to explain the misunderstanding clearly. Stop screaming. I can explain this matter, or I will turn around first. You put on your clothes first, and then we will talk slowly. Don't worry, I won't run away. Yami took the initiative to turn around in the water to show his sincerity. At this moment, another familiar voice suddenly sounded. What happened, Leafia? Looking at the sound, Yami's gaze froze for a moment. The same long blonde hair, also unkempt. Even if she noticed Yami's gaze, she still didn't make any indication. Instead, she tilted her head as if thinking, why did this man appear in this place? It didn't seem very important to her even if she had been completely seen. Yami froze in place, the corners of his eyes twitched slightly, and his eyes showed deep helplessness. It seemed that there was no need to struggle. He was really ready for his death. Leafia Virides and Ais Wallenstein were almost two of Loki's favorite children, and now it seemed there was no way to save him. One Leafia. Who is he? Ais looked over Yami and towards Leafia behind him while continuing to ask. Leafia, awakened by the familiar voice, stopped her screaming, but the moment she saw Ais, she realized something, and her small universe exploded. She directly passed Yami's body and appeared in front of Ais. Ais-san, quickly cover your body. Don't let this nasty voyeur take advantage of you. Leafia blocked Aizi behind her with both hands. Her tone was full of firmness, but what she didn't realize was that this kind of large-scale movement made herself more visible in Yami's sight. She was a good sister who would sacrifice herself for others. Yami, who no longer wanted to struggle much, no longer thought about what to do. He would die anyway, so it was better to enjoy the beautiful scenery in front of him. However, the happy time was always short-lived. What's wrong? Ais, Leafia? Another voice sounded, but compared with the voices of Aizi and Leafia, this voice was obviously more carefree, and the straightforwardness of the owner of the words could be felt just by listening to it. Two girls with dark brown skin appeared simultaneously, and when they saw Yami, their expressions differed. A peeper? Shana. Get him. A Broken Bar Chapter 60, Chapter 060. If you don't have the ability to fight, at least you must have the consciousness of dying. Boom. There was a deafening explosion, and even the ground began to tremble. At the center of the explosion, a figure flew out with billowing thick smoke and smashed into the dense jungle, its body slashed wantonly among the thick branches, leaving very shallow scratches on the exposed body. The figure barely stopped until it rolled several times on the ground and hit a big tree. Cough, cough. The smoke dissipated, revealing Yami's slightly embarrassed figure. They're really merciless. Is this the strength of a level 5 adventurer? I thought Tsubaki's previous battle scene was enough to make people in awe, but now it looked like I was too naive. It's really scary. Caressing his chest, Yami coughed slightly, with faint blood in his saliva. He supported himself with the tree trunk and stood up. The burning pain in his chest was almost suffocating. Just the aftermath of the explosion from the attack turned him into what he is now. LV.5 adventurers were really scary. Yami quickly regained his ability to move by stopping the bleeding through breathing techniques. He looked up at the place where he had flown out before. If there were no accidents, the members of the Loki family would quickly chase after him, although he would not worry about his life being in danger if he was caught. Under normal circumstances, as long as you are not from the dark faction, Familiar members were not allowed to kill each other. Of course, it was okay if no one knew, like how Yami killed those scumbags back then. As long as Yami revealed his identity, with the reputation of Hephaestus's family, his life would probably be saved, but it was unclear whether he would suffer other injuries. It's impossible to put your life in the hands of others, isn't it? Let's take the opportunity to leave here. After looking in that direction unwillingly, Yami immediately turned around and galloped towards Rivera town without hesitation. In this situation, only Tsubaki could save him. He didn't know whether he could successfully escape from this jungle and return to the residence of the Hephaestus family. At this time, Yami didn't hold back at all. He had used it all, whether it was the mark or the transparent world. His whole body became a black shadow, constantly flickering in the forest. "Don't run, pervert-san." Suddenly, a familiar sound came from the sky, causing Yami's expression to change. The strong sense of threat made him subconsciously jump to the side, and almost the moment he left that position, a figure fell from the air and directly smashed the ground to collapse. A radius of tens of meters was destroyed, and many trees and vegetation collapsed. It was enveloped by thick smoke again. "Ah, did you actually dodge it?" "It really surprised me." "Strangely, you can do this even though I feel you're only at the upper level of LV.2 in terms of your aura." In the smoke, Shna walked out slowly, carrying a sword that did not match her petite figure, and looked at Yami with doubt and curiosity. She didn't act quickly but asked a little jumpily, "Hey, little brother, don't run away in such a hurry, although I admire your courage to peep. Since Shin asked me to take you down, there is no other way." "Can you tell me what level of adventurer you are and how you did it just now?" "I've said that I'm not a peeping pervert. I just went to take a bath in the pool." "I didn't know you girls are there, okay?" "I wouldn't have gone there if I knew you all were there." Yami, who didn't answer the question, stood up slowly and saw three other figures approaching from the corner of his eye. Shnaha Ariut, a member of the Loki familiar, an Amazon race, a LV.5 adventurer. One Shnaha Ariut, a member of the Loki family, an Amazon race, a LV.5 adventurer. Ais Wallenstein, a member of the Loki family, a human with fairy blood in her body, is currently suspected of being a LV.5 adventurer, titled Sword Princess. 1. Leafia Viridis, a member of the Loki family, an elf, a LV.3 adventurer, titled 1,000 Elves, but her firepower is comparable to LV.5. 1. No matter which one it was, they were very troublesome characters. If he had to choose, Yami would probably choose Leafia as his opponent. After all, the latter was just a magic idiot, a rookie mage who forgets to chant magic whenever she is frightened. It was a pity that this was not a serious duel but a unilateral crush. "Although I would like to trust you, little brother, there is no other way." This is what Shin asked for. "If I let you go like this, she will be very angry, so why don't you give up your resistance and wait for us to investigate the matter clearly? If it has nothing to do with you, I will let you go. 1. As for this period, I will try my best to ensure your safety, so you can rest assured." Perhaps to confirm the authenticity of her words, Shna held the great double-blade Ulga with one hand and patted her chest with the other to assure him. It was a pity that her meager capital didn't have the slightest convincing power. "It's really troublesome." "It seems that there is no other way then." Yami sighed helplessly, then pulled out the Nichiren sword and pointed it at Shina. The latter showed a surprised expression again. "Oh, do you mean to resist to the end?" "Of course, I don't have a habit of being controlled by others." "If you can't fight, at least you must have the consciousness to die." After the words fell, Yami's eyes became deep. This sentence also stunned the four girls present, and then there was an inexplicable approval in their eyes. The way they looked at the man in front of them also changed. Could a person who could speak such philosophical words really do voyeurism? For a moment, the three girls headed by Shna all showed expressions of thought, and only eyes remained expressionless, making it impossible to see what she was thinking. At this time, grasping the moment when everyone was stunned, Yami disappeared, turned around, and fled toward the distance. 5a. 1 comment.